Okay, here we go. So welcome, January 31 Bitcoin Design Guide Jam session number 20. And the topics that I put here in the background, this is a Google Doc that's also linked in the chat. I think pretty straightforward. We're wrapping up Lightning. We just have a handful of tasks to do. Then I think it would be awesome if we could figure out how we can make a big deal out of this, because it took 6-7 months to do that whole Lightning update. Everybody's maybe a little bit tired of it, but I think it's cool when you get to celebrate something. Maybe somebody needs a break and work on something else afterwards, maybe not. We can chat about that, and then also loosely what everybody wants to do afterwards. But I would just start by wrapping up Lightning, this first thing here, and look at this roadmap. And actually, let me pull up something else here too, because we have this handy issue that Daniel created. So most of the chapters are done, for anybody who doesn't look at this all the time. So all of this stuff here has been done. All of those pages have been updated with Lightning. Now, in the last two, there are 2 pages still outstanding. One is transaction privacy. And this has been on John's plate for a while. I talked to him about it, and I suggested creating, he wants to do a really big overhaul and spend a lot of time on it. But for the sake of getting things done, I talked to him about just doing very lightweight revision of it. Really just going over the content, what's there, revising it so it works with Lightning, and then only adding what's really necessary. And I did start a draft of that. I can dig that up and share it too. And I'm hoping to do a read through of that draft with John's and then turn it into a PR. But it would be ideally a pretty straightforward change. And pull up the page here. It's this one. So it primarily talks about address, creating new addresses every time for every transaction. And then using coin joins, and then overall designing with privacy in mind. So with Lightning, it's a little bit different, but I don't think it's too crazy different. And the thing that I would like to do in this first draft too is just add details about Lightning. Instead of addresses, you just have other types of identifiers that you don't want everybody to know about to piece together your activity. And then also just talking a little bit more on the UI side and less on the technical side about things. So that's the status on this one. And I really want to get this done this week. Ideally, finish the draft tomorrow or Wednesday, and then create a PR and then get it in.
Because I think unlike on-chain with Lightning, I think a lot of the privacy kind of benefits you'd be looking for are mostly done on the technical side. I don't think there's a whole lot you can really do on the UI kind of user side. Like there's a bit more on the UI side with like on-chain, like coin joining and stuff like that. But for Lightning, like, I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of stuff really to cover, except I guess like maybe sharing invoices and stuff like that. There's some data there you might not want to leak to people, but
yeah, I think this was a big change. Just talking about how in Lightning, the Lightning nodes, they're always online and they're tied to a wallet, and that kind of becomes a privacy vector. I'm also linking to the Mastering the Lightning Network book, because they have a really very thorough chapter on privacy. And then, yeah, nothing crazy here. Just really clarifying titles. So it says keep track of who knows about an on-chain address instead of just an address, just minor simplifications. And an extra addition about if you really want good privacy, you can always use multiple wallets and applications, and then just separate different types of activity out into different wallets that are then can't be connected. But yeah, that's where this page is. How does that sound to everyone?
I look forward to reviewing the text more in depth. But yeah, that seems reasonable. Just updating it for Lightning. I mean, I think a overly simplistic way of looking at privacy on Lightning is just that it's more private than on chain. You know, I mean, it's like you don't have to worry about the whole full blockchain history and all of that. So I think that that seems totally reasonable for now to just go through and update the chapter to clarify things like on-chain address and all of that. You know, I think in the future it'd be interesting to see what kind of thinking Johns is doing on the more expanded version, because I know there's been this whole discussion about like you know, can trampoline node improve privacy? We're getting some echo from somebody.
Major echo.
Yeah, I think Mo, that might be you. Only reason
Sorry?
I said, hold on, I'm gonna. Can you mute yourself, Mo?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
echo's gone.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Mo. There was just some echo that was distracting me coming through. We do want to hear from you, though. Yeah, I was just saying that I think that there's this kind of discussion around trampoline nodes and also like things like Phoenix, where you're kind of like shielded by all of your channels going through them. There's interesting discussions to have there, but I mean that's definitely a more of a longer term. That's a much bigger PR. So I think this is good what you're working on, Christoph.
Yeah, I completely agree with Stephen. Don't have much really else to add regarding that, but yeah, trampoline
Great.
nodes and stuff are pretty far away. So
Great, Bosch, because I did make some of the changes based on your quick overview here. Thanks for putting that in. And then, yeah, I think with the bigger stuff, you always have, it's a design guide. It's not necessarily a technical guide, and there's a lot of overlap and there's smooth gradation. But I think it is a consideration how deep you want to go. Let's say, you know, what do I see here? State chains and mini mint. Like there's a certain point where we should make sure we stay on the UX side of things. But if somebody wants to go deeper and go all technical, it's fine too. Cool. But,
oh yeah, I'm not proposing that we need to go into the technical side of those things so much. I was just more saying we should do the thinking about are there design considerations for trampoline nodes, and does it affect the user interface in any way? Is there something that the user needs to know? You know, like if you're using a more of a Phoenix type model, like are there things the user needs to be made aware of, that kind of thing? All for the future.
Yeah. Do we mention Tor anywhere in the guide?
It's a good question.
Yeah, well, I guess that's also the
Not
difference
really.
between payments privacy versus general application privacy. But anyways, we can figure that one out. It's just getting this first one out there. It's the main thing.
should mention it, but yeah, like it could be something as an option. Like
And it is something that affects the UX, because it's something that you know, not using Tor can, you know, give away the user's privacy. So it affects the user in that way, but also it makes things really, really slow to use. So it's like, you know, whether you do use it or don't use it, it affects the user's experience with the service. So yeah, maybe something we should discuss at some point.
definitely in the case of LSPs as well, because with LSPs, like generally the user will only be connected to the LSP's node, and Tor is one good way to obfuscate that you're not using the mobile node connected to that LSP node. It kind of is a way to conceal your information. Otherwise, the LSP will know pretty much every detail about every payment you do.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna focus on this light revision, and then, you know, John's and others can dig in. It is an important topic, though. Okay, the next one is the daily spending, and Stephen, that's one you're working on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go ahead and just paste some links into the chat. The first link I'll paste is a link to the pull request itself. And then the next link I'm going to paste in there is a link to the deploy preview, so you can see it in the browser. And then the other link I'm going to paste, because I'm on a link pasting frenzy here, would be the link to the existing one as it already is on the guide. which is the page that we're updating. And then the last one I will paste will be a link to the current Figma document that I am working with. Where did my Jitsi window go? It is right there. So it looks like you have it on screen there, Christoph. I would appreciate just getting some more reviews on this PR, just getting some more eyes on it. Daniel, I hadn't responded to your last comments on Friday just because I figured we'd be on the Guide Jam call together, so I figured we could have a faster, more high bandwidth discussion about it. But Daniel left me a lot of good feedback just in terms of the updating some of these screens. So the Figma link I shared in the chat actually has the most current versions of all of the screens. So I was able to simplify a lot of things and clear up some things there. If I want to go and say, I think that we have kind of different visions for this page, and I just want to kind of reconcile this with everybody else and figure out what we're doing here. I think previous conversations that we had about the case studies page were these idea that we kind of expanded all of the other pages a lot, right? Like we've expanded the onboarding page, we've expanded the backups page and all this kind of stuff. So there's actually like a lot of very detailed user flows on all of these other pages. And so one idea I remember discussing is just this idea that the case studies kind of become like links to these other pages. The idea being that if we were to try and do a complete case study that shows like an entire app with all the details, all the screens, we would be repeating content that we would really have in more detail on other pages. So the idea that the case study page is more of like a simplified overview of like, here's kind of some of the flows that you might have in your app, but we're just going to link to the other pages for more detailed stuff. Whereas Daniel, if I'm understanding your opinion correctly, you're more saying that you want the case study page to be more of like a complete example of like, this is what a completed app could look like. I'll leave it at that. Just wanted to open things up for discussion on that topic.
Like, I guess just add there, what I kind of would see the case studies page at, and it's just another idea to throw out there. I'm not too sure if I'm fixed on it yet and haven't given it as in-depth thought as I probably should, is the case study section of the guide be primarily focused on like actual case studies that we work on, like as a community, like for example, what outputs we make in the wallet improvement project, like kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier with like the progressive sovereignty, like gamifying kind of thing that I was mentioning, like do a case study around that and have it very like specific on certain topics and maybe use frames from live apps and talk about those, as well as like talk about sections of the guide, so it kind of all kind of coagulates together into like this kind of study that kind of explains like, this is what we went over in the guide, this is what was in this app, this is the study we did. So it's very like I guess more research focused rather than just kind of, because at the moment I think it's a bit more like bringing together what's in the bigger section of the guide, like what you were saying, Stephen, and then kind of giving it in a more simplified kind of way. Whereas like in my mind, I don't know if that adds a lot in my thought process. But
If I could just, I'm sorry. If I could just chime in, I fully agree with what Bosch says. I love to see the research behind why I'm being told something or why I'm being suggested something. So fully agree with him.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephen, for taking on this work. And even though I made the previous page, it doesn't mean that I have the answers to everything here. There are two things that come to mind. One was that we discussed it in a previous call, that maybe the naming of this section is all wrong. Case studies, maybe that should be what Bosch was talking about, more like writing up what we have done with other projects and those sort of things, actually looking at a real case. But when we talked about renaming it, then this was, I can't remember the exact phrase we used, but when this page was created, and what's called case studies today in the guide, it's more like blueprints, right? And the point of them at the time was, at least from my perspective, was that if someone comes in with the view of actually building a wallet product, can we give them good blueprints from where to start from, where we have actually thought through most of the important design choices and laid them out so that they have to do less work, but still get to kind of a better point. So that was the purpose of the previous page. And maybe that's where some of my feedback on the update comes from as well. If we wanted to maintain that purpose, where someone can say, okay, cool, there's all this stuff in the guide, but what does it all boil down to if I want to build a certain kind of wallet? What choices would I make? And I personally still think that is very valuable, right? If someone is wanting to build a daily wallet, I think it would be awesome to be able to pick up a blueprint and say, okay, well, cool. These choices have been made deliberately with a lot of knowledge. It's a great starting point. When they have extra knowledge or more specific things in mind, they can obviously alter that and kind of build on it. But at least they have a very, very solid place to start from. So I'm not sure if that helps you, Stephen, but that was kind of my point of view.
Yeah, so assuming we move forward with the idea of the higher fidelity mockups, like using the UI kit components, I mean, would you want to see like the kind of like how you had the Figma prototype where you can kind of click through? Were you hoping to see something like that?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think, and I think I mentioned that in some feedback as well. I think if we're doing an update of this page, I would imagine, it to be the best daily wallet we can design with Lightning in mind. And I don't think we should lose fidelity from what we had, even though it was only wireframes. It kind of had a lot of the choices, or at least like, okay, what does the setting screen need to contain at the minimum? Or like in onboarding, what are the choices the user might want to make, whether we have a recommended one, which is to sort of just go through the flow. There might be kind of the advanced settings that one might want to set up. So if you already have a node, should you be able to connect that during the onboarding flow, those sort of things. It will be it won't be for most of the users going through the flow, but if you are an advanced user, and you already have it, you would really appreciate it if it was available there during the onboarding flow. So yeah, the short answer is yes, I would like it to be more of a blueprint where I could say, okay, open this Figma, bam, you have like an awesome place to start if you're designing a daily wallet. Like I would think it would be a shame if you open that file and felt like, oh, but they haven't considered this, or like it's lacking these kind of pretty obvious things. Maybe it's just my personal view. I'm happy to take, another approach here, but that would be my view.
I completely agree. Like, I think, I agree with your perspective. I guess tying that in with my perspective that I was bringing up before, I think it's important when we're talking about this is to bring in that context of how we've talked in the past, which we're going to do going forward is the restructuring and having like a mega case study. So we have like the mega case study and it's like the mobile payments app. I think it'd be good to have the case studies that exist at the moment in there, like a daily spending account within that chapter. And then we have a chapter outside of that, which is called case studies like we do now, which contains more of what I was kind of talking about before, which is us applying the guide. And then within the certain products that we're kind of outlining, we have case studies that kind of lay out a specific use case, like exactly what Stephen has there. So like definitely what Stephen's done is useful, and I think that should still be there. But I guess in my mind, maybe just have it as part of that kind of mega case study that we've talked about before with the restructuring. But I'm sure we might talk about that a little bit more tonight. I think you wanted to bring that up, Christoph. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on that.
Cool. So there's a discussion on this. Also, there's an issue from the last jam session here with some of discussion around this. And I dug up the terms reference design and case study on Wikipedia, and they actually work. They fit very well. I also posted the link in the chat. So, whenever you get a chance, maybe just read through those. I think those would work pretty well. And as for the actual case studies, the daily spending is kind of, so even if we change this to reference design, daily spending overlaps a ton with onboarding and payments. I think we can probably merge a lot of that. We don't need to repeat it. Savings account then would be, that's already in decent shape, and it's pretty different because it's on-chain only and it's multi-sig, so that adds a lot of stuff, a lot of new stuff compared to daily spending. Then if you look at upgradable account, that is, I think at that point, once we're done with we have one or two really good case studies. I think the other ones, they can just focus on one or two or three unique user flows around those particular features. Probably the same with a shared account, where we don't need to redo all the onboarding flows and settings and all of that stuff, or send flows even with some of them over and over. But those reference designs can be focused on just those. They can say, okay, it's pretty much like daily spending except for this area, and that's why we show here a unique sequence or something like that. That's just how I see the whole thing. It's all connected.
Yeah, I can work on expanding the daily spending thing to include more user flows. Yeah, so I can get some more commits pushed for that this week. Then just
but don't we already have pretty much all of this covered in onboarding and payments?
I think so. I think it's just a matter of, do we want to just link to those pages, or portray them like all together in one Figma file, like Daniel's suggesting. Like if you go, I think you have it open in the next browser tab, Christoph, the version of the page as it is right now.
Yep.
So you can click that and you can actually go to the Figma prototype and you can click create wallet and click on the advanced button. So you can kind of like drill down through those different user flows. So I think that like with the higher fidelity mockups, like Daniel's suggesting that I would, put those into a prototype like this. So somebody could actually click through the prototype if they want to, or they could open up the Figma file and, mess with all the boards if they wanted. So that would be one way of doing it, versus another way, I think, which is what you're suggesting, Christoph, is that we just link to the payment section or link to the onboarding section or something like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky for me because I spend a lot of these screens are from the Bitcoin UI kit. And so if ideally all of this stuff just lives in one place. So we don't have 5 different design source files that are in just, that are tricky to maintain. But on the other hand, I do see the benefit of just saying this page is one dedicated, everything's here, there's one Figma file, it's all there, and it will not change, even if the UI kit ever changes or so. So I don't know. Might be best to just freeze them in time for these reference designs. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm on board with that.
Okay.
Just pick something and make it awesome.
I like calling them reference designs, by the way. I'm on board with that. And then having case studies for like applying the guide.
Cool. I have another PR open too. I'm not sure if this is something we want to talk about on this call or not. My modal image thing.
Let's see, where are we on the, according to the roadmap? Yeah, those are the remaining pages for Lightning. Then we could either talk about other stuff that people are working on, or we can go to this point, which is, well, what do we do when Lightning's done? Do we, for the first, because there was a big discussion for the V1 last April or May or whenever that was. And there was a, I don't know, did we throw a party or make some big announcement, or I don't know, what did we do?
All that.
Community call, big community call about it or so.
We had a big community call, but I think unfortunately you were on vacation right when it happened. But we, so that's why you don't remember it. But it kind of coincided with the Bitcoin conference in Miami. So I think we launched it like a couple days prior to the conference to kind of, build off of the energy of the event. And it was basically just a community call of like 40 people on there. And we just everybody talked about stuff and talked about why it was important to them and all that kind of stuff. And Pavlinix did a big Twitter thread about it.
True, and it was the same day that through all these things lined up, it was a community call, which is the same day that we sent out the newsletter. So all of that came out at the same time. And the conference. Yeah, maybe we can just try to do the same.
Yeah, seems reasonable. If you want to get really crazy with it, we have all these ideas about trying to kind of re-architect the landing page and all this, and changing the case studies to reference designs and use cases and all that. And the Bitcoin conference this year is a little bit earlier, the Miami one. It is in April. So, one thing could go for like an April launch if we wanted to try and do it right before another big conference.
Yeah, I'll be keen for that. I think that's a good idea. I think it's good to go off that momentum.
So it is April 6th through 9th.
I think we should do a bit of a media release as well. I mentioned it to Christoph the other day. Maybe just write something up and send it to the primary, main Bitcoin only publications, like Bitcoin Magazine. Could maybe even hit up some of the podcasts, and if they want to, they could ask someone from the community to come on a call and talk about what we've been doing. I think they're good ways to publicize what we've been working on.
Yeah, here in my background is the planning document for the last release.
Can you share that in the chat if that's all right?
Yeah. So in the FOSDEM talk, FOSDEM is this weekend, by the way, you should check it out. There's lots of good talks about open design. And we also talk about the guide and how we're wrapping up V2 and a little bit about what's next. So we are already kind of setting a direction there, I guess. Everybody signed up for FOSDEM? Actually, you don't have to sign up. There's no sign-up process. You just show up the day of, and then you click a link of the talk, and then you watch it. And if you want to chat during the talk, then you have to sign up.
So that's why I signed up. I just figured I was going to click on a YouTube link or something. But yeah, I'll sign up so I can be in the chat and do what we did for the other open source conference, where we get all the Bitcoin design people in the chat.
Yeah, at Figma Config, that was wild, wasn't it? Jones and I were presenting, so I couldn't see it, but it sounded like there were just crazy comments flying by, and we were just trying to talk to people.
Yeah, so me and Patricia both had I guess the Bitcoin design URL on our clipboard. Or I did. I'm assuming she must have too, because every time it would just be in the chat, where do I find this? Where do I find this online? Where do I find this? We just Command V, Command V, Command V. Every time somebody would ask that question.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It would be awesome to get some support in the comments.
It's at a weird time for me, but so I'll probably have to watch a recording. But good luck with it, Christoph.
Is it in an American imperialist time zone?
Yeah.
Sweet.
No, I don't think it is. I'll share the link.
Last year it was quite early in the morning for me. I just watched the recording after.
It's pretty much at noon. So there's a talk by at the end of the day called "Calling All UX Designers" by Scott Jensen, and he's a very seasoned designer. He actually worked at Apple on their human interface guidelines a while back and all stuff. So, and he's trying to make an effort to get more designers into open source. Then there's other stuff like designers are the mediators of accessibility, synthesizing user testing insight. How do we design open source communities to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Setting up for design contributions, documenting a design system should be all good stuff. Okay, anyways, back to this topic. So how about for the next the Reeve on, create another document and start an async conversation.
Yep, that's good.
Collaborative planning.
Sorry, just a quick question. The FOSDEM, if I pronounce it correctly, do you know what time zone that's in?
So our talk is at 12:10
to 12:35. And is that European time or?
I'll say most likely UTC.
When you hover it, it shows you +1 time zone.
Oh yeah, I see that. +1.
What is that? German time? For me? Bosch, what time does it? Maybe it automatically shows you the correct time already. Bosch, what time does that talk show for you? I'll share the link. Okay, we'll figure that one out. Okay. Yeah, Stephen, you wanna look at something less overwhelming is this link here, which is just the open source design track.
Yeah, I saw that. I tried to click on one of the links to figure out what time zone it was, and it took me to that page, and I was like, whoa.
That's the power user page.
It's CET time +1, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So +1, so that's probably, that's probably pretty much your time zone, Christoph, I imagine. UTC, I think it's like Greenwich or whatever, UK.
Yep. Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to the next thing then. So we can either talk about, well, that's kind of the same thing, right? What's next, and then what people are working on already. So I wanted to EOS webcam utility. So how does the people who've worked on the guide, how do they feel at this moment? Tired of it, need a break, pumped to keep going? What's going on?
I'm real pumped to get the restructuring stuff ramped up. I'm pretty keen to get that started and getting like a nice, more like user interface guidelines like Apple has on the homepage to kind of navigate the certain areas. I think the idea of having like the mega case study in the guide section, so it's easier to find like what kind of product you're looking for, and that will kind of lay the foundation for other product types that we eventually get into in the future, like savings related stuff and maybe hardware wallets, whatever it is. I'm pretty keen to get on with that as well. I'm working on that LSP page, which I've got a bunch of ideas for, and I'll get the update that PR probably later in this week, and hoping once that's kind of fleshed out a little bit more and has a bit more context, there might be some other areas in the payment section that are worth like adding some content to that relates some links to that LSP page. I know LSPs are still quite novel when they're not like widely distributed, so it might be too early to say that's the kind of way forward, but it seems like that. Yeah, keen to kind of, I guess, intertwine a lot of that LSP context in the payments guide. I think that's probably pretty pivotal when it comes to usability at this stage with Lightning. That's our main focus. So.
Yeah, I'm excited about the restructure as well. It's, I feel like a lot of what we've been doing is good, but it's a lot of just kind of administrative. It almost feels administrative, like we're going through sections and just kind of like trying to update them or correct them and things like that. So the restructure seems like a good opportunity to work in some more creative rethinkings of what a Lightning wallet can be.
Definitely. Yep. I'm also keen to something I've got on my to-do list to do over the next month or so is I just want to like go through the guide in detail from start to finish, and because the space moves so quick, I think it's important to do that every few months, like, and just like add stuff that comes up, and there's technical developments that come forward that are changing that are probably worth mentioning, and as usability, like designers and stuff like that, I think we should be thinking ahead, even if some of the tech implementations aren't fully fleshed out. Like we could be like like let's add a tip and be like this is being worked on, it could have this usability improvements, etc., etc. So I think it's important to do a review. So probably over the next month or so, I'll go through the guide just from top to finish and just look at areas that we can add, and maybe add comments on new kind of developments that are happening in the space, and add reference to new products that are being worked on so people can go check those out. It is a little bit administrative, like Stephen was saying, but yeah, I don't mind doing that stuff. So I'll be doing a bit of that over the next month.
To make it a little bit less administrative, is there any interest in doing these collaborative group reading sessions like we had for the Lightning book, where you just
yes, we
take
should.
a section and just talk about it and ask questions, dig around?
Yep, I'm keen to do that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. And because I think that would also then, the people who worked on it, who are really deep into this stuff and have their ideas, it would also allow them some intermingling with maybe people who just have not even looked at this but are new to it, and ask some questions, get some answers, and also help inform maybe what still needs to be changed.
Now, were you thinking about that in terms of a reading session? Were you thinking about that more like we're going to get a bunch of people who haven't seen this section before together to like review it and get opinions on it so we can get feedback and improve it? Or are you looking at more like a workshop kind of thing, like we're going to take this chapter and discuss it and everybody comes out of it having done a lot of good thinking about backup user flows or something?
So I have no clear ideas on this. Also depends on whoever wants to do this. Something that I was thinking of doing also, which is, so there's the workshop requires the most planning and preparation, and then people come out with fairly specific things. The reading group is a little bit more open-ended, and the most the least planned thing is, let's say Bosch, you decide you want to work on whatever payments page, whichever one. You just say, hey, next week, Tuesday, 2 p.m., whatever time zone, I'm going to spend an hour on Jitsi going over this page. If somebody wants to join, cool. If not, well, you're going to do that anyways, right? You're going to dedicate the time to work on it. And you could open that up too, for anyone. If somebody joins, cool, then you can do it together. If not, then you just do it by yourself, which you would have done anyways. So I don't know. I think there are different models, and the more involved you make the planning, the more tedious it can also become.
I'll probably do both either way, because I kind of like just reading the guide and like, I guess, my personal time. I'm a bit of a digester. I like to sit there and just read and kind of go over things. So I'll do both. I think both formats will work. Like the same for individual as well. But it would be nice.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing the same today or tomorrow with the Satoshi symbol concept. Just say, hey, next 2 hours I'll be on Jitsi, YouTube, Twitch, whatever, just working on these concepts. If somebody wants to join in or watch, welcome to do so. See what
do you guys
happens.
reckon about? Me and Christoph were talking about this the other day. Like, what do you guys think of the Satoshi symbol? Like, I'm kind of in the camp that we shouldn't have a symbol, but yeah, interested to see what you guys think.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm.
No Satoshi symbol.
I don't know. I could go either way.
Let's give the people options and see what they and say, and also make sure to include an option to not have one, because that also needs to be on the table. But hey Mo, what do you think? What would you like to see with the guide? Would you like to join a really casual improvised session and just talk about things? Would you prefer a workshop? What is something where you would say this format is something for me? I would join.
I like that really simple format that you suggested, where it's less planning from your side. So it's just like, hey guys, I'm going to be working on the design ideas for the Satoshi symbol in the next 2 hours. Feel free to hop on a call. And I think it's interesting, like, to see how someone works on something. Their like design thinking process, I find it really interesting because it's something that I can learn from. And also, like what Bosch said, is like, if he would be working on a case study and taking an hour to review that page, I find it really interesting to just be like, oh, okay, why are you doing that? Why are you making that suggestion? Just kind of, I don't know, pick his brain a little bit. I think I can learn a lot from that. So yeah.
Well, just on that top, just on what you said then, Mo. I know you haven't done one yet, Christoph, but we're going to do the calls with Connor on Twitch, which was kind of what you just said. So have like a live chat where we'd have like Christoph or like myself or Stephen or Daniel, and like we just kind of get us like work on some design related issue, like project live or issue or something, and people join in and they can just ask questions and like you said, pick their brain. I know we're going to do that. It's a little bit unrelated to the design guide directly. It's a project Connor's working on called Bitcoin Developers, but just wanted to throw that in there. It's popped in my mind when you said that. It's kind of a similar kind of thing.
Something else comes to mind as well. I think Christoph mentioned this a while back. I don't know if it was in the chat with him or if it was somewhere in the Slack community, but it's a UX lens. So it's the same thing. It's design thinking. So it's like, how do you, when you view something like an app or something, how do you apply design thinking? Like, what's your thinking process? What's the UX lens that you actually put the design through? Like, I'm really interested in that because it's just something that I've seen. There's no like proper resources about how to put something through a UX lens, like the actual steps. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Do you have examples of different lenses?
So like you can have like a UI. So it's more focused on the UI. So I have a document, but I have no idea where it is. So there's like this UI course that I was going to take. And basically what the guy says is, so when he's looking at a UX wallet, for example, he's going to first apply a grid. And then that's going to be step number one. Then he's going to align things in a specific way to the grid. Step number two is he's going to decide on the spacing, just like that kind of lens, like really
Yeah, I mean
specific.
that's a very just layout typography design system
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah, I'm really interested in learning more about that because I think that my knowledge is now more on the research side. So I'd love to learn more about the actual UI side of things. Yeah.
Yes, it is very good. And I think sometimes it happens when people talk about something and they look at things through different lenses, and it leads to them not just talking past each other. So I think that's a good thing to be aware of. Okay. Okay, cool. So where does that leave us? We're 50 minutes into this call. I have to say, I'm also excited to take a step back and look at this guide and see that there's nothing, and just take time to polish, to just take a fresh look, polish it, improve things, maybe make small additions like a page about accessibility, tweak things, make them nicer, better, easier, more accessible, and ideally get lots of feedback. And also, like Bosch, like you said, take some of those things, the pages that we created, and just try 10 different wallets and see how everything stacks up, and see how using those things feel just in a more casual way. It requires more independence, I guess, work or approach, where everybody just kind of picks their angle at it and does something and tries to find an improvement, which means I think that happened a little bit after we were done with version 1, where people just kind of went off for a little bit. The Slack felt a little bit dead at times, and then people came back together for this mission of putting Lightning in the guide. So I'm curious if it'll be similar, where we'll have a little bit of a slow time, where everybody is on their own a little bit, and then we'll find a new mission.
Yeah, like I think it'd be nice to, I know Lightning is the focus and that's kind of what we've been prioritizing recently, but it would be nice to, if we have like the mega Lightning payments mobile app case study, it would be cool to do probably like an on-chain focus case study and get real in depth with that. Like that could be something I think we could do like later in the year once we've finished all this stuff and polish it off.
Yeah, I think there's, as you see from Steve's comments, they're very, very specific. There are definitely levels of UX implementation and detail that we haven't gotten to in our content, that we can get to now. But I think that might be more of a personal thing. Right? Some people might say, I want to go deeper on MSPs or something, and somebody else says, well, or I might say, well, I think we need to talk about accessibility, and that's kind of a new topic in the guide, and I might just focus on that for a little bit. But I think, Bosch, it overlaps very well with all your stuff with Zeus, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Like, it'd be cool to even get into like node management, like routing stuff. Like in my mind, I think there's a lot of like groundwork to be done on the routing node UX usability side of things before the payments kind of layer really gets fleshed out. Like I've talked with Evan, he's like the head developer with Zeus, and they had some data from Kraken, and it was under 100,000 people pretty much with all the main non-custodial Lightning wallets combined people. So still like very early days. So it's not surprising that like we got a lot of data to work with, a lot of like, I guess, other ideas to kind of explore, because I don't think there's a whole lot of use case. And of those 100,000 people, like I'd say most of them probably just experimenting, playing around. Like it's still real like early days. So it's kind of hard to like pinpoint where to like focus, I guess, at this point. But like I was saying before, like LSPs, like routing related stuff, I think is kind of going to be a big kind of focus over this year, and then next year maybe the real kind of wave of people coming onto simplified payments apps will be occurring.
That's going to be interesting. Cool. We're almost at the hour. What Anything else you'd like to chat about? Because I should have taken some notes here in this document.
I was going to open a PR tomorrow about recommending 12-word recovery phrases or 24 words. I don't know if that's one of those kind of bike shedding kind of topics, but it seems that 12 words is entirely enough, and you only get the same amount of entropy from 12 or 24 words when you get a recovery phrase. And on a usability side, it's a lot easier to recover back up 12 words than 24. So maybe just going to add a small addition.
I think it's worth discussing. Yeah, it's like I'm still trying to wrap my head around the math of it, but that's what I agree. I mean, that's what people are saying. It seems that 12 and 24 provides you the same amount of entropy. So, I mean, if that's the case, it's something we should seriously consider including in the guide.
Because I think it doesn't output 256 bits entropy because the way Bitcoin's kind of orchestrated, it stayed with 120 bits to keep block signatures small and stuff like that. So there's a block saving thing. But I opened a question on Stack Exchange today, this morning. So I'm hoping to maybe get some answers from some developers and get some more in-depth responses about that topic. Because the only real kind of conversations I've seen is a few loose ones on Twitter, as well as that Andreas Antonopoulos video discussing it. But that is an important thing, I think, when it comes to usability. So I think it'd be worth bringing up in the guide.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. If it's correct, it helps or makes things simpler for everybody. Another similarly not super important in the overall picture, but something I think could be interesting is I just opened a new issue, which was triggered again by Steve, about potentially adopting lowercase b for Bitcoin everywhere. It's I don't really think this is going to change the world, but I also, if I have to think about it, I don't think the distinction between lowercase b for the technology and uppercase b for the technology and lowercase b for using it as money makes any sense at all. So I'm kind of for getting rid of that distinction. Again, it's not a huge important topic, but I'm just curious to get the temperature from everybody. Is there somebody that's like adamant that it should stay?
What do currencies use? Like when you say a currency, do they use uppercase? Is it?
Well, I mean, I think the important thing to notice is that dollar is not a different thing whether you use capital or lowercase, right? It doesn't mean dollar, the technology. It's always whatever you mean by dollar, whether it's, depending on the context. So, and I think that goes for other technologies too, right? If I came into JavaScript development and was told that JavaScript with a capital J is something different from JavaScript with lowercase, I mean, that wouldn't register with me. So, I think it's little gain for a lot of confusion.
So the real question is here, Bosch, in your image, it's a capitalized B, but then your name is lowercase. What does that mean?
I don't know. I was just being edgy. Just made a lowercase. It's intentional. It's intentional.
Yeah,
my perspective on this is, if people get hung up on it, let's just change it and we can move on. I have no interest.
Yeah, I kind of feel like making that distinction is maybe something that developers would care about. I think in a guide, just sticking with one is probably best. Like maybe developers want to make that distinction, like they're a bit more like ingrained in the details. Whereas like I think for an end user, they don't care about that.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea because I'm not opposed to switching it all to be one way or the other. I mean, I personally kind of like the idea of the being able to distinguish grammatically between the two different concepts. Are we talking about a network or are we talking about a currency? So that makes total sense to me. Now, having said that, you have to be pragmatic about these things and see in practice how people behave around these things. And if the lowercase uppercase just causes confusion, then it hasn't really achieved its goal of separating the two concepts in people's minds. So yeah, I mean, I can go on either way on that. I like the idea that we have the distinction, but if the distinction causes confusion, then it's not doing its job. So I mean, maybe lowercasing it, just making it simple is good. Now, I would say if we're talking about lowercasing that, I would apply the same reasoning to Lightning Network too. So, you know, we're always capitalizing the L. Some people capitalize the L and the N. I think right now we mostly just capitalize the L. Does that become lowercase too? But yeah, I'm open to this discussion.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the temperature check. You know, I didn't mean to conclude the issue here and now, but that's really helpful. And I agree with you on the Lightning issue. I don't think it's any different, really. And I still think Lightning as a brand is somewhat problematic. But on the other hand, it is meaningfully different. You need some way of talking about when something is not on chain, so it needs to be called something. So maybe it's more, you know, following through with what you say about, okay, let's not treat it as a brand. So drop the capital L, and it becomes more of a descriptive thing.
Oh, and not to, you know, drive this point farther than we need to, but yeah, I mean, this just popped in my head about one unanswered question I had once on a GitHub issue was somebody told me to lowercase or uppercase a B in a sentence, and I was trying to ask a comment. I don't remember who all was involved in the discussion, but I never could get a straight answer from it. I could not get anybody to agree on it. And the question I was trying to ask was something along the lines of like, okay, it's a Bitcoin wallet, but is it a Bitcoin wallet because it allows you to spend Bitcoin as in lowercase b, or is it a Bitcoin wallet because it connects you to the Bitcoin network, which is uppercase B? And it's like, it's not entirely clear. Like, even if we want to have the distinction of lowercase and uppercase, like there's some like muddy situations like that where it's not entirely clear which one you're talking about. So it's like, yeah, just having it all lowercase, just picking one would totally simplify that, and we wouldn't have to go through these like, you know, mental gymnastics to try and figure out what we're talking about. So it could really lower some cognitive burden.
Or we come up with an intermediate B, a middle case. It's not lowercase and not uppercase, but it stands for both.
Yeah, it's for when you're talking, for when it could be either one.
Well, I know we've talked about in the past as well about like, because yeah, we could just have Bitcoin and convert in one terminology, and then just have like other appendages to describe different types of wallets. Like I know we've talked about like full wallets and hosted wallets, like what we refer to like as an exchange wallet, like a hosted Bitcoin wallet, a full Bitcoin wallet. Could like just go into that kind of realm. If that's something users want, if I want that more descriptive term for different types of wallets, because obviously there's a massive distinction between like, say, Phoenix and Bitcoin Core. Like calling them both just a Bitcoin wallet would be pretty confusing to a user if they downloaded them both at the same time, and they're completely different ends of the spectrum, you know. So maybe adding that extra kind of appendage kind of terminology for those kinds of situations makes more sense than worrying about capitalized B or lowercase b. Just to add that to the conversation.
Cool. All right, we're 5 minutes over the hour. You are more than welcome to keep chatting about capitalization if you like. But is there anything else we should talk? We don't have really a lot of takeaways from this call other than we're going to wrap up our respective tasks and we will do offline planning or async planning of some announcement based on the last announcement. Is there anything else?
I wouldn't mind getting like a doc together to work on for the restructuring and just get people's ideas and what they think, because I know it's been probably a couple of months since you really like discussed that, and it would be good to get like Pav and stuff, the views on that.
Yeah, I think this is one also where we will fairly quickly come to the limits of language, and we will need to mock up 5 different versions to really see what this whole thing would be like.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was gonna put visuals in the doc.
Text and visuals. And we can get
Text and
some,
visuals, yeah.
we can put together a
Multimedia,
mood
baby.
board too with yes, we could put some a mood board too if we find some good references on that. I think that's actually, that'll be a fun task to figure out like, what this thing should feel like. A nice step forward. Okay, cool. Anything else?
I wouldn't mind getting the content, just an idea, just to have just send range of Twitter. We could maybe create some like small visuals of just like tidbits out of the guide, and share them on Twitter. I think Alexa's been managing the Twitter, but just like now that we've got like quite a lot of content in there, it'd be cool to just like maybe share like little sections of it, like a nice little visual, or explain it just in text, and then just like link to the guide. So that way we can get some bit more like maybe people on Twitter who haven't heard of the guide before, maybe get some traction and stuff like that for that. But just an idea of something we could do now that we've got quite a bit of content.
To add on to that, so a good thing to do is also if, and I have not done this, but if we try to search for or pay attention to conversations that are happening where we have relevant content, just chime in when these things come up instead of starting conversations. Maybe it could be 50-50. Sometimes we just post stuff because we think it's important, people should talk about it, and other times we chime in when people are discussing those things that we already have covered.
I try to keep up to date with stuff and mention comments, but yeah, we could do that too.
Yeah,
Are you pretty active in that regard?
Yeah, I usually chime in on combos if they come up. Like I follow most people who are kind of, I guess, working in the UX space of Bitcoin. So usually chime in and reference the guide like where I can.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm not enough on Twitter, I guess, or in the.
We could just make like small visuals. Say for a quick example would be like I was talking before the 12 verse 24. You could just have 2 images of mobiles, one with a 24 seed, one with a 12 seed, and just have like a tick next to the 12, cross next to the 24, and be like, Bitcoin applications should use 12 word seeds instead of, or recovery phrases instead of 24, and just have a little description as to why, and link to the Bitcoin design code. Like just like that's kind of what I had in mind, just like real small niche things. So like
yeah, I think that's what I was envisioning too. Like I was envisioning like basically taking a chapter or a section from the guide. This is what popped in my head as soon as you brought it up, Bosh. Like just trying to take a chapter from the guide that might be a lot of words and just try and distill that down into its bare essence. So try and like convert that chapter into a Twitter thread, and the Twitter thread would be like 4, maybe 5 tweets with some images, some nice looking images, but just make a little engaging Twitter thread, and like the last tweet in the thread is a link to, hey, interested in learning more about this or discussing this, and then it's a link to that chapter in the guide. So it's kind of a funnel that gets people to go to the chapter, but the thread itself should be engaging on its own.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, take a look at John Cantrell's Twitter. Hey, John, if you're watching. So he just said one of his goals for this year was to become a better writer. So he posted every day some long thread about Bitcoin. And some of it was pretty technical, like purpose of Lightning Network. Let me see. And he just did a summary where he just today or yesterday, he said, well, this was really awesome. 2.5 million people looked at his posts. 7,000 new people decided to follow him. And so I think maybe that's an inspiration there. Just try to pick some topic around design, UX, Bitcoin, Lightning, whatever, and just post about it every day. See what happens.
Yeah, we could post stuff.
Could be something else.
I've been reading all those threads. They're all great. But yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing this morning. I was like, be cool to like do this in like a product kind of design spin and like talk about a certain feature, but in the context of maybe like design. You could also just talk about it in a general sense. Like, for example, you could say like have a thread on what's an LSP and kind of talk about it in the context of like not the detailed, complex side of it, technical side of it, I mean, but talk about it in the sense of like, you know, you can offer these like usability benefits to users and why, what does it mean, and blah, blah, blah.
Do it. Make it happen. I want to see it.
I'll draft one up and I'll post it and see if we get much followers. But I feel like we're in a niche within a niche. I feel like Bitcoin is a niche and then design is in the niche. But yeah, definitely, I think I'd be keen to do that. Keen to get some threads up. I like posting on Twitter.
Yeah, and if you want to break out the niche, turn it into a TikTok dance.
I've never even used TikTok, so it'll be fun.
How's your dancing?
Not good.
Hey, maybe that's exactly what's needed. Okay, cool. Anything else? Daniel, you're there? How's lunch going?
Yeah, I'm still here, but it's probably time to go back to work. But no, it's been nice listening in, and I'm looking forward to new ideas from everybody on the guide as well. Personally, I must admit I am feeling a little bit fatigued by working on it after more than a year and a half, close to 2 years. So I'm really looking forward to hearing others' ideas, and then I'm sure I'll be re-energized at some point. But right now, I feel like I need to maybe get involved in something related, but not maybe the guide kind of primarily.
Yeah, makes sense. And the good thing is that we can do whatever the hell we want. If you you can come up with the most fun project that you can just possibly think of and just do it.
Yeah, and it'll all come back to the guide eventually. I think that's maybe what I'm feeling a bit of a lack of is, I love designing and building myself. It's great to provide resources for others, but I think at the end of the day, what I really like is doing something myself. And then maybe what I need to do is try that, and then whatever I learn from that can come back into the guide somehow with a bit more kind of like real point of view.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like to be able to do some other stuff as well. Like I think having some other project to apply the guide to keeps the kind of excitement and momentum kind of going, rather than just working on the guide all the time. Like I guess that's what I got kind of Zeus for. Like I just like go back and forth between the guide and Zeus, but it all kind of like interconnects. So it's relevant. Like if I'm thinking about something with the guide, I'll go work on that particular thing within Zeus to like frame my thinking about how to best do that within the guide. So I've got like that, I guess, way to apply what I'm trying to think about, which is a fun. I like doing it like that. Like it's a fun way.
And just a question for Bosch. Were you gonna like come up with just a rough format idea of the case study page? Was that kind of the thing that you were gonna come up with?
I'm not too sure. Like I think I'd rather wait to get the restructuring done and then best see how to go about that. But I think going forward, once we have some content from the Walnut Improvement Project, maybe some other case studies, like I want to work on something related to Zeus, maybe we'll like restructure things there a little bit. But yeah, I think maybe wait till we do the restructure and then think about like changing things around and having like reference designs in certain mega case study sections, and like restructuring the case study sections to be focused on like guide application things. I think maybe, once we kind of do that restructure and that, we could probably bring that back up and kind of think about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So once we've kind of gotten our feet dirty doing the wall improvement project, you kind of know more what the structure of a case study should maybe look like, and then kind of throw an idea together based on that.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.